this last panel that we're going to have is one I think that you'll find to be very, very informative and useful. So I want to introduce the moderator of this panel. I think we've been very fortunate to have him agree to participate. And that's Glenn Sugiyama, the managing partner for DHR International. DHR has 55 offices worldwide. They do searches for, of course, college athletics, but also the NBA, the NFL, international programs like Barcelona, and just done so many things. So for this topic, one that's on evaluating, recruiting, and hiring talent, I couldn't think of anybody who would be more perfect, because Glenn's probably hired, evaluated, and recruited more talent than just about anybody out there when you look at his tremendous international experience. So I'm going to turn it over to Glenn and let him moderate, this panel.
So thanks a lot, Doc. I appreciate you having me here, and look forward to, I see a lot of familiar faces, a lot of people we know, some clients of ours, some DHR clients on here. So great to see all of you. And like I said, there is a piece about hiring and in this session, but it's more important to get Doc's and Wood Selig's viewpoint because it's going to be from their point of view as opposed to mine. So, this session's a unique opportunity to listen and observe the interaction between successful ADs and two individuals who they hired at different points of their career. So it's going to be listen up for what they looked for at one point in their career at one institution, as opposed to hiring somebody at another point in their career at another institution. So with that, I'm going to start the session and introduce Doc. And Doc obviously is the former athletic director at VCU in East Tennessee State. And Doc, why don't you please introduce your staff, their background, and your thought process when hiring each of them at the different points of your career.
Thanks, Glenn. Like you said, I've been in two different places, VCU when I was a relatively young athletic director, and then at ETSU after I actually had a run at VCU for 22, 23 years, retired, and somehow or another made the decision to get back into it. It got recruited by President Nolan to do that. But I think, the two people who I have with me today are Alfreeda Goff, who came to me to help me build the VCU program, and then Kay Lennon-McGrew, who I hired here at ETSU. And first, let me say, one of the things, of course, this topic is evaluating, recruiting, and hiring talent. And I kind of have to go back to when I was a basketball coach. The one thing that was important was to have good players. And so I think that has always kind of affected my thought pattern on hiring people. I want to recruit people, in a lot of cases at universities, you kind of get, you go through these search processes, and depending upon, if you're at a state or private institution, a public or private institution, you may have to go through all different kind of processes to hire people. But my belief is I want to recruit people. I want to go out and find the best possible people to fill that role for us. I don't always just allow individuals to pursue the job. I want to find the best possible, just like if I was coaching basketball, I'm going to recruit the basketball players that fit into my system, into my program. So I think, for me, that has always been kind of one of the critical pieces as I move forward in hiring and employing staff. So I think about the question, I hired Alfreeda Goff at VCU, and you kind of have to know the situation there. VCU was a pretty unique place in 1986 when I took the job. Basically, it was a good men's basketball program, and all the other sports and everything else, the only reason they had it was so they could have a basketball program. We had all part-time coaches, the staff. We had very, very young, ambitious staff. Wood Selig was on there, Ken Cutler, who later went on to Penn State and UConn, back to Penn State as their major fundraiser. I had Tim Fitzpatrick, who went on to numerous jobs. His last one in college athletics was the AD at the Coast Guard Academy. And so those guys were all like 23, 24, 25 years old. And they all had come out of, a graduate program in sports management. Some of the older people that I had there, they had no clue. They had no idea. The woman who was in charge of compliance, she'd take the summer off. So I'm sure VCU wasn't, I can't think of how many violations they had because the woman wasn't even there for 3 months of the year. The business manager probably couldn't count to 10. That was a problem. So we had all kinds of challenges. So I really needed somebody to come in and help me basically build this program. And I needed somebody who had experience, but also had a personality where people would really engage with her. And she had the experience and would have the, just have that ability to engage and connect and lead. So basically I needed somebody to help me basically, develop the plan, develop the relationships, and create the whole program. And of course, Alfreeda was at the University of Pittsburgh. She had been a former track coach and was doing administration there at Pittsburgh. So she was a perfect fit for me to come in. And she really, once again, because we had such we laugh about it, when we got there, it was just a skeleton of an athletic program. It was just basically a basketball program, men's basketball program, and nothing else. So we really had to build that thing from scratch and to develop the identity and the culture that we needed. I needed somebody who really had a lot of experience and both also had coaching experience. So that was important to me. Plus, I think I really needed somebody who could relate and mentor those young people who were all very talented, but very, very young. And then, so that was kind of the mindset with Alfreeda. And she did an incredible job. And probably, people at VCU, if they really don't know that all the success that VCU's had since, in probably the last 20 years, Alfreeda was probably a big part of that because she really helped establish that culture and helped build that program. And then when I got here to ETSU, I really needed, I really wanted somebody to come in here, and we needed somebody that was very, very smart, who really would help us in the compliance world. But more so, once again, I needed somebody to bring in new ideas, fresh ideas, somebody that had energy, somebody that had enthusiasm, somebody that had the ability to connect with people across campus. Because traditionally, before I got here, there was a real divide between the athletic department and the university administration. Everything from admissions to financial aid to student accounting to just about everywhere. And I needed somebody who could reach out to them and would build equity and build credibility with that group. Plus, I needed somebody who could relate to the coaches. Compliance is a tough deal, but I think you really have to have somebody who the coaches feel is in their corner. And while we're going to be compliant, Kay Lennon, with her legal background, kind of had that mentality that, hey, my employee, just like my client, in a law firm, I'm going to do everything I can to put them in the best possible position. So that really kind of unified the whole athletic department. So while they were completely different, there was a clear-cut reason why I hired each one of them, and they both fulfilled those roles magnificently.
Sounds good. And the other thing that you mentioned, and that's important, is it's always an automatic thing for coaches. When we hire coaches, they come in, they get to bring their whole staff. It's automatic. Whereas when you're an athletic director, you come in, you have all your staff there, and you have to evaluate everybody, and you have to pick and choose where you're going to bring, who's going to be that first big hire, somebody that somebody that you're comfortable with, those types of things. So, with that, I'm going to call on Wood Selig, Wood, the athletic director at Old Dominion, and veteran on Zoom, already came off mute, and so Wood, same question for you. Why don't you introduce the two staffers on the Zoom here with you, and talk about your mindset at the two different stages that you hired them.
Thank you, Glenn. And yeah, thank you for helping me with the mute. I learned from experience. No, with me, I have Darrell Horn, who was our Senior Associate Athletic Director at Western Kentucky in charge of our financial operations, and also Ken Brown, who is currently our Deputy Athletic Director at Old Dominion and oversees our business operations. But like Dick indicated, when I got the job at Western Kentucky, I would think I was about 37, 38, first time AD. And I went to Western Kentucky and I met everyone, and I realized that we had a real issue financially. The business manager at the time the first year we finished up, I think we were about $4 or $5 million over budget. And I didn't think I'd be an athletic director very long if I kept coming in, $4 to $5 million over budget. So I met with him. I started mid-year, so I didn't really prepare the budget. And I said, how did we miss by such a wide mark our budget this year? And I'm an external person. I don't do budgets. I don't do finance. So I really knew I needed somebody pretty good in that role. And when I left VCU under Dick Sander, I remember the business manager at VCU was so good, and we were always on the mark, always on the money. We even called our business manager the Tin Man, because like the Wizard of Oz, he had no heart. So you'd walk into his office and he'd just say no, and we would make budget every single year. So I said, I got to find a Tin Man out there. I need somebody who can be like he is and balance the budget every year. And the business manager at VCU had not been in athletics when he was hired. He'd been in the private sector. So I get to Western Kentucky and I'm thinking, okay, I got to go find a Tin Man somewhere, because this guy is not going to make it, because he budgeted. He would just say, well, what I do is I look at our expenses and then I just make up what we're going to generate in revenue to balance the expenses. And that's what I turn into the university every year. And that's just how it goes. I'm like, that is crazy. I am going to lose my job immediately with that situation. So I let him go, and I went out and advertised, but I researched. I said, I'm going to go find someone who doesn't know athletics. I'm not saying Darrell Horn didn't know athletics, but who didn't come up from athletics. I don't want anyone who's going to be influenced by coaches, who's going to be influenced by people asking for money. I want somebody from the private sector who can come in and forecast and really balance a budget and handle this like a business operation. So I found Darrell Horn, who came in and flipped it around immediately. And he could say no with a smile, but he at least was firm. He knew how to forecast, and it really turned the financial operations around. So then when I left Western Kentucky and came to Old Dominion, ironically, we had similar situation at Old Dominion, but it was a little bit in reverse. The business manager, as a new AD here, I sent everyone a questionnaire. I sent them 9 questions. And I said, some of the questions were, what do you want to see change the most? What do you want to see change the least? What are you most afraid I might do as a new athletic director at Old Dominion? And then I met with everybody and went over their responses. And there was a theme that was going through their responses. And it was the morale of the athletic department is terrible. And it all starts with our business office. And the business manager, he had 1 hour of open door policy. So imagine on your respective campuses, athletic programs, a business manager who says, if you need me, I'm available between like 12 and 1. Well, most people like to eat lunch between 12 and 1, not go meet with the business managers. But that was the 1 hour that he would give everyone a chance to see him. Otherwise, the door was closed. And people would finish with a positive budget, and he'd scoop it all up and put it back in the athletic department reserves. So it was really a bad culture. So we made a change, and I brought in Ken Brown. And like Dick said, I went out and looked for Ken. I talked to a number of people in the business. Ken was an athletic director in Tennessee at Lambeth, an NAIA program, but he'd run an operation, had coaches reporting to him. And I wanted somebody who would say, again, no with a smile, but help people find a way to get things done, who'd worked with coaches, and have elevated Ken to our deputy athletic director, and he's been terrific. But again, if you're an external person and you take over as an athletic director, I can't emphasize enough having a strong internal financial officer to help you run your operation.
Sounds good. And while we're with Wood, Ken and Darrell, why don't you tell us about Wood's leadership style and what you valued most about working with Wood? So let's go Ken first, then Darrell.
Well, Wood is correct in that he doesn't know anything about the budget. Let's make sure everyone understands that. But it doesn't stop him from trying to act like he knows something about the budget. The most fun I get out of it is when he's in front of a group and he starts talking about the budget, because I really don't know what numbers he's going to throw out there. But it's interesting to see what they are. His rounding method is amazing, to say nothing of the least. But, you know, I guess I knew Wood a little bit going up through the business and been doing it a long time. And so I wasn't quite sure what he was looking for and what I was looking for, but we really mesh philosophically. You know, he doesn't look over your shoulder. He lets you do your job. He communicates. He has an open door policy. Those are all the things that I feel are necessary no matter what department you're running. The business office door is always open. And my door is always open unless I'm in a private meeting. So, and Wood is right. I was a ticket guy at North Carolina for 7.5 years, and I learned how to say no without saying the word no. And that's sort of the philosophy I've had with our coaching staff. And I want them to feel comfortable coming into the business office. And I hope they understand that we do try to help them in any way we can. Now, there are times you're going to say you can't do that, but I do feel like my staff has been great. But Wood, as he's a coach's, I believe, truly believe he's a coach's AD. I mean, he wants to support them, and he does support them. And I think hopefully they appreciate that. So his philosophy and mine meshes very close together. So it's been very, very easy for me. But he does a great job, and he does a great job across campus. And I think that's important. So it's been a great relationship for 9 years. Hard to believe it's been 9 years.
Sounds good. Darrell?
Yes.
Same
Can you hear
question.
me?
Yeah.
Okay. All righty. Well, I have to agree with a lot of what Ken said. Actually, I didn't know I did so well. I should have asked for a raise in that first year. But anyhow, you know, he like Ken said, he doesn't micromanage people. You should know what your job is, and you just go do it. And he's fair with everyone. And as Ken said, also he has great working relationships across campus, and I tried to follow that example. And we had great relationships all across campus, from the president's office to the CFO to housing people to whatever. It's important to have those relationships, because at some point in time you're going to need to call them and ask for help. And in my opinion, he showed no favorites on his staff. You know, when he had to hire people, he hired people that were great supporting staff to the job that we had to get done. And he also supported my attendance in going to CADMA. He actually suggested that I go to CADMA because, as I said, I came out of private industry. I had no clue about athletics. I was a little worried the first week that I showed up at Western, because he went on vacation and I was there by myself. Had no clue what I was doing, and so I relied on the lady in my office that I inherited, and she was a great value and great help. She basically trained me. But I agree with everything that Ken said, and I really appreciate the patience that he had with me, because since I came from that private industry, I was really learning all of the ins and outs of the athletic world, especially compliance issues. I was across the aisle about every day talking to our compliance person to make sure I wasn't doing something that was incorrect, and try to get his approval on everything. But all in all, I just felt like that he was a great people person. He just understood people. He was patient with people, and he had great relationships across campus and also in the community. And that came in value later on, I think, when we tried to do some other things, that he had great supporters. But I just really appreciate him giving me a chance. So I agree. He just does not micromanage, and I think that's important. And as Ken said, he had an open door. I had an open door. I never turned away an athlete that needed to come in and talk about whatever he needed to talk about, and Wood was the same way. So I really appreciated his taking a chance on me, and I had a good ride at Western.
You know, one thing that I've learned already, Wood and Doc are both very kind to people as long as they're on their Zoom. But I never want them talking about me if I'm not on the Zoom, I'll tell you that. Can't count to 10. Jumping back to Alfreeda. Alfreeda, why don't you tell us about your relationship with Doc and his leadership style when working with you?
It started out very well. When he hired me to be the coordinator, that was the title, of men and women's sports, except for women's basketball, baseball, and men's basketball. And I was like, okay, that's great. You know, and we had to develop this partnership. And about 6 weeks after I was there, he called me in the office. I was like, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. He goes, I need to talk to you about something. And I was like, okay, what's up? He goes, well, I've had the baseball coach and the women's basketball coach walk in here and say they want you to be their supervisor because they're excited about what you're doing with the other programs that wasn't being done for them. So I knew that he trusted me with his program, and our relationship developed based on trust, based on communication. You know, if he empowered people to do their job, he didn't micromanage you. He did not micromanage you. He said, if you need help, let me know, but you are empowered. So I love working for Doc because of that. Creativity. He always had an idea. He'd come to our staff meetings and he'd say, well, what do you guys think about this? You know, and his dream was to build an on-campus facility, which we all looked at him and said, uh-oh, he's drinking way too much tab, because we knew what kind of money VCU had. We knew there wasn't great community support for VCU at that time, but that was his dream, to get an on-campus facility for men and women's basketball. Obviously, that dream became real. It took a little while, but he never gave up that dream. Also, the family atmosphere that he created with our staff. You know, one of the things I always treasured was our Christmas party at Doc's house, because he would just lay out a lot of food, a lot of drink, and a lot of fun. And of course, Mary was always the greatest hostess. He always gave Mary the credit, but we knew that Doc was the impetus behind that. One of the things that was really important for me, I was a single mother, had raised a son who was now away in college. I'm moving to Richmond, Virginia from Pittsburgh, where I was born, raised, and groomed, to a city in the South. I'm a Yankee, bottom line, you know, so I had to adjust. And I was made very comfortable by Doc and how he treated people, because I'm a people person like Doc, and I like to treat people like I'd like to be treated. And that's the way Doc was with all of his staff. And one of the things that I always tell people about Doc, you always knew where he stood. There was never no second guessing Doc. He was very clear, very articulate. You may not agree with him, but he was going to let you know. But you learn how to work with him, you know, get him to maybe come around to your way of thinking. But he didn't say no often. He just said, well, let's see how we can do this different. Because coming from Pitt, you know, I'm coming from a university where they have big time football, lots of money. When I coached, my track budget was the same as the men's track budget. We flew, and I got to VCU and he goes, we don't have any money like that, just so you know. He says, what we have, let's do the best we can by our kids and by our coaches with that. He said, so we have to take small steps to get to the big picture, but if we're steady with our walk, we will attain whatever our goals are that we set. So it was a joy to work with Doc. Every day was different. No 2 days were the same. And he gave me the compliance piece. He said to you earlier that his compliance person took 3 months off. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I became the compliance queen. That's what the coaches called me, because I sent more memos, had more meetings, because they were used to their compliance person not being around. But Doc supported me, and we actually didn't have any major violations while I was there. You know, you have your minor, but nothing major, secondary. So it's about relationships. Doc is good about building those. And I think once Kay starts talking, you will hear some of the same things.
Sounds good. Kay?
I could not agree more with Alfreeda. I mean, when I was thinking about Doc and his leadership for this seminar, I thought, you know, his relationships, he trusts you if he hires you. He cares about your families. The Christmas party is still going on. He added a golf tournament to it, which was great. And exactly what Alfreeda said, he's authentic and you know where you stand. And I think that's really important that you see over the course of his athletics director career. Although he probably tweaked things here and there, who he was as a person has not changed, and how he treated his people has not changed. And my relationship with him, you know, I met him by happenstance. I was actually working for Alfreda's son, Anton Goff, at the time. He was my athletics director, and I had just switched careers 3 years before. And when he called me, and with Anton's blessing, and I came down and decided I was going to work for Doc, what I noticed right off the bat was he kept calling me even before I started. And then after I started working for him, he knew when my mom was having surgery, what was going on with my family. Right off the bat, we had a major conflict with a coach and a department over a student athlete issue. And he goes, you take it, you got it. And I was like, okay, I've only been here 5 minutes. And so he handled it. And when the coach came down in a way that the coach wasn't happy with, and he went and talked to Doc was like, all right, talk to me. It's like, no, I agree with Kay. And that kind of trust that he builds in his people is phenomenal and allows them to grow.
Sounds good. Doc, why don't you talk about your two staffers that are on the Zoom today, and what was it that they did that made them invaluable to you?
Well, you know, they're both very talented, you know, so, you know, Kay is super talented. I mean, she's a superstar, and Alfreeda, I think everybody knows that. You just follow her career and see the tremendous success. And both of them had this ability to relate to people. And, you know, it's just like anything. I have tremendous trust in them. You know, I would, they're both smart, they're both motivated. And, you know, I think they both do something for me. They kind of, for lack of a better term, they kind of filter me to some degree, you know, and I think I had that relationship with both of them. If I was, you know, kind of out there on a tangent, you know, they both could kind of bring me back to some realistic viewpoint, you know. And so I think, you know, particularly the way I am, and they know me very well, you know, I can really get going. So, you know, I think they both can really kind of say, hey, let's look at it this way, you know, and kind of bring things into perspective. So they're really helpful for me to kind of play that role, you know, and sometimes I'll say, we're going to do this and that. And I mean, they can be, you know, kinds of, I wanted them to be devil's advocate. Well, what about this? Can we do this a different way? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about the unintended consequences if we do this or that or the other thing? So they became, you know, real confidants to me, and really, you know, and really filters or to kind of, you know, maybe I'd be too far one way and maybe get it back a little bit more where it needed to be. So for me, they played an incredible role of that besides their job, you know. So I think everybody kind of needs some people on the staff like that. And I know when we were at VCU and Wood, I mean, we'd have staff meetings, and I mean, we'd get in those staff meetings and everybody kind of had an open, you know, had an open forum. You know, I'd get out there and I really encourage people to tell me what they thought. You know, if I came up with some lame brain idea, you know, they would say, Doc, you know, that's really crazy. You know, that's way too far. And I'll say, well, tell me why, or things like that. So I think that was really important to be able to do that, to have that connection where but I think both Frida and Kay kind of really played that role to a major level for me. So I think that was really important. I think every athletic director needs, if it's not your whole staff, you need somebody on there you can sit down and really talk about and have total confidence and trust, even the most confidential things that are out there. Sometimes you just need somebody you can talk to and kind of give you a little bit different perspective on things. And they both played that role.
Wood, same question with Darrell and Ken. What are the characteristics that they embody, and what's the one thing that sticks out to you that made them invaluable to you?
Well, Glenn, I think for all of us, who become athletic directors, it seems like you're always the one who has to deliver the bad news, whether it's someone who's losing their job or, a donor who's not getting the seat location that they want, or whatever the situation is. So sometimes it's nice to have other people who will deliver the bad news. It's kind of like the president's panel yesterday, where the president said, you know what, it's easy to make the easy calls and the easy decisions, but don't kick every tough decision up to me and make me make that decision. So as Ken said, I'm horrible with numbers, and I like to throw out numbers and that are incorrect, and he's always there to correct me. But when a coach comes in and says, hey, I want to do this, or I need this for recruiting, or I need a little bit more scholarship money to get this kid, we just don't have quite enough, I'm usually always the one who's going to say yes. And same thing with Western Kentucky. The coach would say, hey, I need this facility upgrade, and I'm like, absolutely, let's do it. But then I'd always say, well, you got to go check with Darrell, or you got to go check with Ken. And that's when they get the bad news that we didn't have the money. So it helped me out, because I was never saying no. I'm always saying, hell yeah, let's go do that. And then it was daggone Darrell and Ken who put the squash on everything. And for one time, I didn't have to be the bad guy. So that's how invaluable they were for me. But then we'd work well together, because they would never, they didn't worry about saying, hey, I'm sorry, Wood overspoke, or we can't do that. And I was fine with that too. But then that got us back together, and we'd say, okay, let's get our fundraisers in the room. Let's get our other folks in the room, and let's go figure a way how we can do this. So it was kind of like a mom and dad approach, where you got to have the two together, or else they're going to find the end run. But they were both very knowledgeable about finance. They were both very stern, and wouldn't go over the line. Like I said, they could say no with a smile. They were very loyal, and they had that open door policy, and always were willing to try and find a way to get something done. But they saved me many times from having to always be the bad guy and the no guy. And as you all know or will learn, unfortunately in this role, that seems to be about the only thing you get to do a lot of times is be the bad guy or the no guy.
Sounds good. And, we're doing really good on time right now. So if anybody has a question for any of the participants on this panel, please use the chat function, and we'll be able to have some time for Q&A at the end. Kay and Alfreeda, specific to your specific roles, provide an example of a difficult situation that you had to handle with Doc, and what you observed of how he handled that. Kay?
So I think I'd been working for Doc for about 5 months, and I had a student athlete walk into my office and share some information with me. And this is all public now, but not necessarily the conversations of what happened. And when they walked out, I went, I don't know what's going to happen when we pull this string, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to end well. And so I went into Doc's office and told him what I had been advised of. And his first question to me was, well, what do you think? And I laid out my plan of what I would recommend that we do. And he added to it because he came at it from years of experience, and we executed it. And where we ended up was in the middle of an NCAA infractions case. And so what impressed me the most was he didn't hide from it. He owned it immediately. And it wasn't on us. It had nothing to do with us as administrators. He talked to the president, he did the right thing, and we moved through the process right away. And a lot of times what you see in the news in athletics is people want to hide as opposed to just tackling the issue head on. And so as we move through the process, and again, I'd only been working with him for 5 months, the amount of trust that he had in me, he would ask me questions, but he didn't necessarily second guess me. And with the issues that we had, he was briefing the president constantly. And he was the type of athletics director that said, you know, I'm going to bring you with me and I want you to speak. It wasn't that I came in and was a fly on the wall. It was, you're part of this process. And he, as Alfreeda said, really empowered me to engage. And I credited that to 2 things. The first was, you know, he hires people, and once he's evaluated his expertise, he trusts you. And then second, he knew my ultimate goal was to be an athletics director, and he was putting me in positions that I wouldn't necessarily have been in, and allowing me to brief the president. And so as we went on, this infraction case, it ended up becoming public the night we had just finished practicing for the first round of the NCAA tournament. And I spent that entire day watching Doc vacillate between talking to the NCAA and briefing the president on this infraction case, to being with his head men's basketball coach and talking through the next day, to being inside the room with the other athletics directors that were there for that round of the tournament. And it was just so impressive to see how he could work through it, how he did not, at least externally, let it affect him. And I agree with Alfreeda and Doc in that Doc is very authentic. You know where he stands, so you know when he's up and down. But when it really hit the fan, he was the calmest person in the room. He thought through it. He asked for other people's opinions. And I really took something away from that, because that was the highest moment of that year. We were in the NCAA tournament, and also the lowest moment, because we knew what was coming and that eventually we would end up on probation. And it was just so impressive to see how he worked through that, and the fact that he brought his staff in and let them be involved and trusted us.
Sounds good. Alfreeda?
This is more of a sad note. We lost an athlete. A basketball player died during practice, and Doc and I got the call, and he said to me, we have to be the ones to hold up the kids, the coaches, and the students. And it was real difficult because we were a family. You know, we weren't one of these we weren't in Ohio State where you have 500 student athletes. Everybody knew Doc. Doc knew every one of the athletes. And this was a young man who had a heart disease we weren't aware of. And he had come to us from the military. He had served 2 years in the military. And Mike Brown was at practice, and he literally fell down on the floor. And he got back up, and they thought he was fooling around, you know, just being silly. And then he fell back down, never to get back up again. Doc and I talked about how do we manage this with our coaches, our student athletes, our basketball players, and our general student and our other student athletes. Doc took the bull by the horns and said, we've got to be strong for those who are weak, those who are grieving. So we worked together to make sure that our coaches were okay, and whatever their needs were, Doc made sure that very calmly he would say to them, it's okay to cry. It's okay to be sad. We just lost a member of our family. He didn't say we just lost a basketball player. He said we just lost a member of our family, and we will get through this together. And just thinking about that and how he organized and empowered me and Jeff and a couple other people in the office to do some things, i.e. get transportation for the team to go to the wake, to get transportation for our staff to go down to the wake, for our basketball players to be the pallbearers. We worked with the family. They requested that he be buried in a VCU basketball uniform. They requested that a basketball be in the casket. I mean, these are hard things as a mother, let alone an administrator, to have to go through. But Doc, through it all, made sure that we were okay. He said, Freeda, it's okay if you cry. I said, I know, but we've got to be strong. He goes, no, it is okay if you cry. You just lost somebody from the family. So I was always grateful to Doc for that, because that was a dark time. That was a real dark time for us. And it's one I never forgot. And I pray none of you ever have to go through that. But if you do, and you have a leader like Doc, he will get you through it. You got to work together, be there for each other. So that probably was the one example that I always remind myself of how strong of a leader Doc was and how calm he was. Now, internally, I can't tell you what he was going through and what he did when he went home. But when he was in front of his staff, his athletes, and that family, I remember Mike's mother walking up to Dick and just grabbing Dick and hugging him and saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then the university went on and granted the young man his graduation diploma, because it happened in January, and the school, the provost, and Dick was the impetus behind that also. This young man died, but can we still continue to honor him? And the university said yes, because of Doc's leadership. So I thank you again, Doc. I know I thanked you 100 times for that, but I will continue to thank you, because truly a lot of leaders would not have wanted to even deal with that.
Great. That's a powerful story. Darrell, same question.
Oh my, that's a hard act to follow on that now. I think one of the things, the hardest things that we had to do while Wood was the AD was we decided to transition to FBS football. And this probably falls more on Wood and his leadership than me, other than the fact that we had to do a lot of number crunching. We had to do a lot of Excel spreadsheets and, so to speak, kind of like cash flow things. And we also had to ask the university to increase our athletic fee. We just didn't have the funds available to be able to make that transition adequately and to support the football program the way that it needed to be supported to make that jump. But Wood was always there for that. And, you know, he had all these relationships already built across campus with the president's office, the chief financial officer, and all those people were kind of already on our side. And so Wood would always meet with them, talk with them, and then you had to get the university senate on board, which is a whole nother animal if you have to deal with the university senate. But it all worked out pretty well. And we made a transition. It was rough at first. Then you have to, you know, talk to your supporters. You have to make sure that the cities and the city officials and all those people are in support of your transition to a different degree. But through it all, I felt like that Wood was the stabilizing force, and I was just kind of behind in the scenes doing all the numbers that need to be run and crunched. But that was probably one of the biggest things that we had to handle while I was there at WKU. And then other the fact that when I first got there too, and this is kind of a side note, as Wood said, there was not enough revenue available. The athletic fee was woefully low. And so I hadn't probably been there a week, and he decided that we needed to raise the athletic fee. And my first meeting was walking up the hill with him to the Senate, to the university Senate. And that was, he did all the talking, I just did all the listening, because I hadn't been there long and I was sweating like a stuck pig when I got up top of the hill. But all those things worked out well, and it's his leadership. It comes down a little bit that Wood is a great salesman. I mean, he believes in the cause. He knows how to talk with people. He's a people person. And I believe that you have to be a people person to be an athletic director. And I thank him for that. So Ken, I don't know, I may have just taken your story. I don't know. Yo, Ken.
Ken, go ahead.
Yeah, Darrell, thank you. Well, I've got a couple, but I guess I have to pick one. I think as a former athletic director, I think one of the toughest, if not the toughest issue that you deal with, other than certainly a death of a student athlete would be higher than this, but is personnel and needing to change personnel. I just think being in this business so long, it's it doesn't seem to be, there's not a book you can go to, there's not rules you can read and go, this is the proper way of letting, whether it's a coach or staff member go. I've had to do it at Old Dominion because of budget issues, but Wood had me sit in one time with one of our major coaches, and he was going to have to terminate this coach, and the season was still going on. And so he handled it unbelievably. He handled it with compassion. It doesn't matter whether you like the person or don't like the person, you're affecting a lot of people's lives, just not the person that's in the room. And his demeanor was so calm, and he just handled it. I was just really, I'm sort of the guy that I'm straight and to the point, and I don't get mean or angry. I just spit it out, and this is the way it is. And, he took his time, he talked to the person, he really here's the reasons. And you're going to get criticized as an athletic director when you terminate. It doesn't matter. You're going to get criticized. I mean, you're going to get criticized because why did you do it now? Or why did you wait till this date? Why didn't you do it earlier? How do you deliver it? But his delivery was unbelievable. You had to really be in the room. I was really proud of him and how he had the coach almost feeling sorry for him. That is how he handled that situation, and I'll never forget it, because like I said, I've had to do it, and a lot of sleepless nights beforehand, knowing you're getting ready to do it. To me, it's the worst thing we have to do in our business. And I was very, very impressed by the way Wood handled that situation.
I think people forget, when you're in an athletic department, it's just not running events. I mean, we're dealing with, real-time issues in real time. And, athletic departments are a microcosm of what's going on in society. And there's nothing that happens in society that you don't have to deal with in an athletic department. So, and if you take this year, for example, 2020, I don't know if there's been a more unprecedented time, a more trying time for an athletic department in so many different ways. So, everybody on this Zoom, and I see a lot of familiar faces, and there's some people on here who are going to be athletic directors very soon. Okay, I recognize a lot of faces here, and so having gone through these things, and I know it's tough times, but just know that these experiences are making everybody better, and and we're the people like myself and my colleagues in my industry, we know who's out there and who's doing good work. And I want you to know that, because sometimes you're out there working hard and you're saying, does anybody know what's going on? And we take pride, our firm, we take pride in making sure that we value most what people are doing in their specific athletic department. What is your boss? What is Wood and Doc? What do they think about you? People that you directly report to. We look at candidates, and we call them donut candidates. Okay, and those are candidates that, as we're on the outside, way out, where they look really good to us. Okay, and these are candidates that are very active in national organizations and NACDA, and they'll have big name ADs calling us, supporting them. But then as we get closer and closer to their athletic department, closer to the people that they work with, that's when it starts to fall apart a little bit. So just never forget when for people like myself, when we're looking to judge who's doing good work, nothing means more to me than what you're doing in your own specific job on a daily basis. Okay, the other things that happen, you know, boards and all these things to serve on, that's secondary in nature. The most important thing is who's really doing the work, who are the real ones. And we take a lot of pride in taking our time in finding that out about people. And so, like I said, there's a lot of good people on this Zoom that I know, and just hang in there. I know these are tough times, but there's going to be opportunities. With that, we have some questions here. Dan Bartholomew from Oregon State University, a DHR client, has a question, and so wanted to call on Dan.
Thanks, Glenn. Always good to see you, and many thanks to the panelists. This has been really an insightful couple of days, so I appreciate everybody taking the time to share their wisdom with us. My question: we have a lot of budgetary experts on this group, on this particular panel, and just thinking about, these are obviously the most trying financial times that I can think of in my career in college athletics. And as it was stated yesterday, I don't think they're going away anytime soon. So at a time where, particularly in working with coaches, we are changing the resources that we are able to provide them. There are a lot of challenges on the horizon, and really some obstacles that are going to get in the way of doing things the way we used to do them. Maybe talk a little, there's a lot of talk about saying no, and obviously I get that in my role for sure, but maybe talk a little bit about how do you manage expectations ahead of time, and what are some of the strategies that you have to manage those expectations, in particular with coaches, so that those no conversations are a little bit easier to have.
I can talk a little bit about that. When I got to ETSU, they had, and I was just going to be here on an interim basis. I just came to help President Nolan out for a couple months, but it turned into 5 years. But when I got here, they had a complete disconnect. They somehow or another, the woman who was the SWA told all the coaches that they were fully funded for scholarships. The only problem was the business guy and the university didn't budget for all that. So when I got here in the middle of the year, there was an $800,000 shortfall, and, of course, ETSU's budget isn't huge to start with. It was probably $13 million. So when you have an $800,000 shortfall, that's pretty significant. So for me, I'm not smart enough to figure anything out too much, but I just brought all the head coaches in the office and just kind of outlined exactly what happened, showed them the whole budget. Here's where we are. You know what I mean? Everybody, we got to figure out a way to do this. So we're all in this together. What ideas you got? I'm not sure, I have every solution. And to be honest, one of our soccer coaches said, well, I think we can save some money on scholarships, because at ETSU, they have something called International Merit Scholarships. And up to that time, none of the programs were using international merit except men's soccer. And it basically took tuition from out of state to in state for all international student athletes. And we probably had, at that point, 50 or 60 international student athletes. So once he kind of came up with that solution, that was probably a $500,000 savings right there. We went in, we applied all these kids, got them on international merit, and it was a huge savings for the department. But for me, I think you just get everybody in the room and just show them, man, here are the dollars, here's what we got, and then the other thing that I did, I developed, completed a strategic plan and basically showed people what our priorities were. Just say, hey, this is what they are. There's no secrets here. This is what they are. This is how we're going to allocate resources based upon priorities. And it was right there sitting in the strategic plan. And, we talked to them all along, talked to all the coaches and all the department heads all along. But I mean, I think that's the only way you can deal with it. You're just going to have to show people this is where we are. We're not bullshitting. This is reality, man. We're all in this together, and we're all going to figure it out. There's going to be pain, and the pain may not be evenly distributed. It may be a whole lot more painful for you than for somebody else, because we do have priorities, and that's the world we live in. I always say, unlimited wants, but limited natural resources, and we got to figure it out. But I think as an AD, you're very straightforward, you're very honest, and you tell them how we're going to allocate resources based upon well-established priorities.
I'm going to piggyback on what Doc said, that it's really important that you forecast to the best of the ability that you can. You may not know what your budget cut is going to be, or even if it's going to happen. But one of the things we sat down and talked about very quickly in April was, we don't know how long this is going to go for, but we need to assume there's a cut coming, and we need to have a plan. And we sort of targeted 3 percentages. And then if you don't have sports supervision, this is something you do need to think about when you become an AD, is how you're going to articulate that message. So when I went and spoke to my coaches, I said, okay, this is what we're planning for. I'm not saying there's a cut coming. I'm not saying that this is definite, but what I want to do now is have the conversation so that when the state, if you're a state institution or your board or your president says a cut is coming, they're prepared for it. They've had a conversation. You may have to adapt that a little bit, but at least they've thought about it. And then being very careful about your word choice, because as soon as you start telling people you're cutting things, they're going to think their jobs are on the line. So one of the analogies I used when we started looking at the numbers and crunching their budgets was, I was an athlete at Florida, 20 years ago. So there were things we were able to do 20 years ago that we were not spending the money that is spent today. So let's start to think about how we were able to compete then and what we've added now that is maybe a luxury that you don't actually have to compete. And so that really helped my coaches think it through. 3 months later, when we got the notice, hey, this is happening, they weren't caught off guard. The relationships were intact, and they really felt informed. And I think that was really important.
Dan, I would add, I don't think we have as big a resource problem as people make it out to be, because we've got a ton of resources throughout intercollegiate athletics. We have a no problem. We don't have a resource problem. We have a no problem. We won't say no enough. We won't say no, we're not going to pay that salary. We won't say no, we're not going to build that barber shop in that football facility. We won't say no, we're not going to give you permission to go play your spring game in Europe. We let it go. And we let it go to the extent that now you have the Knight Commission and you have Congress and you have other people are going to have to weigh in perhaps to save us from ourselves. The Knight Commission, which I applaud the Knight Commission, great think tank organization, they're talking about intercollegiate athletics needs to perhaps ask for an antitrust exemption to control or cap salaries. Are you kidding me? So we need someone else to come in and save us from ourselves. Because why have we let it get like this? Why are we paying some of the salaries that we're paying? Because we have a no problem. And the people who don't say no, what we get caught up in is competition, and we're so competitive, and we don't want to lose this coach, or we don't want to get outbuilt over here, because if we do, it might cost us our job. So we don't want to lose our job, but and it's not just at football and basketball. Are you kidding me what soccer coaches are making and what lacrosse coaches are making? And let's go compare them to school teachers and police officers and people who really do some good things. I mean, we're just playing games at the end of the day. But if you look at where we are from a compensation standpoint, and I'm going to include myself in that, where we are from a compensation standpoint to the rest of the world and the value that it shows, we're not in higher education, we're in entertainment. We're paying entertainment dollars. So I think we all need a reality check, and maybe coronavirus is that reality check, and it's the reset, and it's, you know what, we're not going to pay that anymore, and we're not going to spend that, and we're not going to travel like that. We're going to play closer to home. And if this is the great wake up, then great. You know, we've needed that for a long time.
Great point. Anyone else?
No, I mean, I think what Wood said is right on target. You know, we got carried away with a lot of things, and I think it's just crazy where we got to, and everybody kind of fell into that trap. And I think we and all the people on this Zoom who are going to be the leaders of the next generation need to keep that in the back of their mind. You know, we have that responsibility to be fiscally responsible and not just be crazy with the money that we're spending. And, you know, and I think, you know, that's really important, really, really important, because you can really lose perspective on what you're doing. These are young people that are trying to get a college education, who want to compete. And, you know, that's what they are. When we start, you know, like Wood said, when we're spending money to build, you know, these crazy support facilities and paying coaches and, you know, flying, you know, charters, you know, 120 miles. I mean, I just think we got to get all that kind of back in, you know, back into reality. And I fear a little bit that we're really setting such a bad precedent, because we're not really providing these young people a real life experience. Because a lot of, you know, when you get a real job after you've been in college, it's not going to be quite like that.
Exactly.
Randall Richmond, do you have a question?
Yeah, quick question. And Wood, thanks. I think we just had our end of the year raise evaluation right here in public. So again, you and Drew sharing private business, but here we are. So this one is for Alfreeda. Sometimes trailblazers can be called malcontents, and that's probably true in Doc Sanders' evaluations at times, but not in yours. Is it something from him that you then learned and took it on to the people who you then began to hire, because you are indeed a trailblazer?
Well, thank you for the compliment. Probably the main thing I learned from Doc was to sit still, be quiet, and listen. My mom, God rest her soul, used to say, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth. So he expects you to listen more and talk less. But seriously, I think that we have to stop and we need to listen, especially to the young people that we have on staffs, because that's what Doc did. You know, he didn't come here and say, oh, he's 23, 24 years old. Rookie, doesn't know anything. Everybody's voice was important. And if we don't allow the voices to be heard, we don't know what they're thinking about. So I would highly recommend, as an athletic director, take time and listen to the people that you hire. You don't always have to agree, but I always say you don't have to be disagreeable either. But you can find a common thread or a way that you can, like Doc said, sometimes we used to have to pull him. He'd be out in right field. I said, Doc, I need you back at home plate. You know, let's start this over again. And he would say, okay, yeah, that makes sense now. But there's other times he goes, Frida, no, I disagree with that. And this is why. And sometimes he would have to pull me out to right field because he was right. So our differences sometimes can be our strengths, but sometimes our differences can be our weaknesses. You've got to be able to find that middle point of bringing both sides together. So communication, communication, communication. It sounds old school, but it still works.
Sounds good. Well, thanks, everybody. This has been a great session for everybody. I think, you know, one of the things that I wanted to talk about before I close here is, you know, when we talk about preparing yourself to be an athletic director, what are things that we look for as a search firm when we're putting people into searches? One thing is we're always looking, never take it personally, because we're always looking for a specific fit for a school. So every client gives us different parameters and characteristics that they're looking for in a candidate. So, you know, sometimes we're looking for something a little bit different. It doesn't mean that this person's a better candidate than you are, et cetera, that person may be a better fit for that specific job. And I want everybody to understand that, those are, I think, we're not a firm that has a stable of candidates. So last 13 finals in a row, we haven't had anybody interview in a final, I don't think, more than once. And so, we're constantly looking for an institutional fit for a school. And then one other tip, well, there's two tips, and you all passed the first one. Never leave my session early. So everybody who's still on the call, you passed number one, okay? And then number two, I think always, when you have that end of the year evaluation with your boss, take the time and they say, what can I do to help you? Always try and do something else, expand yourself elsewhere in the department. If you're internal, look for some external responsibility. If you're external, look for some internal responsibility. Try and kind of cross-pollinate yourself and get other experiences. We've had both Division I opportunities, athletic director opportunities we hired this year so far, and both candidates went from one side of the house to the other. Dwayne Peavy, who got the DePaul job, started out, as in sports information and ended up being a sports administrator for men's basketball, which is obviously important for DePaul, but also, got into fundraising and development and dealt with building their practice facility and utilizing that relationship with their biggest donor, that donor had a big effect in Dwayne's candidacy for the DePaul job. And then at Central Michigan, we hired Amy Folan. Amy Folan's a candidate who started out in compliance and worked at the NCAA, and then went to Texas and got into fundraising and development. So again, look to do different things, and it goes in cycles as to what we hire, right? What we hire is what schools want, okay? What presidents want. We're merely a reflection of what the presidents want. And so, there was a time when it was only fundraisers were getting jobs, and every internal person's coming up to me saying, you only hire fundraisers. Well, the schools are interested in raising money. But now it got to a point where, faculty and presidents cared about student athlete welfare, student athlete academics. Then it became very internal. Then it went away from the development people, and it came to people who dealt with 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds as opposed to 65, 70, 75-year-olds, So it it goes in cycles as to what we look for. So just, at the end of the day, we're looking for talented people who are strong leaders. And no matter what seat you're sitting in, if you're a strong leader and people notice it, we'll hear about you, okay? And in addition to us hearing about you, I invite anybody here who is in this session. My assistant's name is Morgan Miller at my office in Chicago. Feel free to give her a call if you're ever in Chicago traveling, passing through, there for a game, what have you. In the summertime, take your time and you want to come up and spend an hour or two with me, I'd be happy to meet with anybody. Okay,
Glenn,
always forward to
thank you so much for ending us on such an inspiring note, because I know that this last 2 days has just been great, and that is just such a good note and such a positive note. And we really appreciate you. We appreciate DHR for lending you to us. We really appreciate you taking the time and closing this out and getting us through. And I can't thank you enough. Can't thank the panelists enough on this last panel, and really appreciate everyone who is given their time.